storm, with US allies striking back and Americans likely paying the price. One day after the latest round of threats and reversals by the US president, Canada is retaliating against its southern neighbor with 25% tariffs on a variety of goods set to take effect on Thursday. Earlier, the world's largest trading bloc announced its response after President Trump dramatically escalated his trade war.
Tariffs are taxes. They are bad for business and worse for consumers. The countermeasures we take today are strong but proportionate. As the United States are applying tariffs worth $28 billion, we are responding with countermeasures worth 26 billion euros.
The US Secretary of State is defending Trump's new steel and aluminum tariffs ahead of his arrival at the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Canada. Marco Rubio is set to arrive in Quebec City in just a few hours. On his way there, America's top diplomat addressed the ceasefire proposal agreed to by the US and Ukraine on Tuesday. And one day after proclaiming the ball is now in Moscow's court, he says the US will have some contact with Russia today.
As far as the Russian reaction to it, that's really the question here. And that is, this was a few hours old. We're going to bring it to them directly. We're going to say that Ukraine is prepared to stop all battlefield activity and begin the immediate process of negotiating an enduring end to the war. And we'll see what the response is.
Right now, President Trump is hosting Ireland's Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, at the White House. CNN's Nick Robertson joins us live now from London. So Nick, just in terms of the ceasefire proposal, obviously all eyes on Vladimir Putin to see what he says. Obviously there is a lot for him to consider here. He does find himself in quite a dilemma. What does he need to consider and pause to think about before agreeing to these terms?
Yeah, and I think the Russians will have given this a lot of consideration because they would see a version of this coming whereby there's a potential to be in a period of negotiations. And I think when we look at the battlefield, about their accelerated push in Kursk, which takes time, days, weeks to organize before you put it into effect, and it's been in effect for a couple of days, that really tells you that Russia, in a way, is preparing for those talks. So yes, they've been thinking about it, and typically the way that Russia approaches ceasefire type talks like this, the way they've approached it in the past, is, they may initially sound positive, but when they start to talk about it, teams will be established, there will be delegations that go and meet, and then there will be a lot of details you can expect to come from the Russians about what they want and what they expect. And I think we got a taste from Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, earlier today about how Russia will message what it's doing. And typically what it's done in the past is sort of to invert the facts and play them back against the other side. And Lavrov's version of that today was to use this expression that no discussions about the future of Ukraine without Ukraine in the room. And he said everyone's talking about that, but no one's talking about, Russia needing to be at the table when the discussions are about Russia. Well, actually, Russia did sit down with US officials a couple of weeks ago, and that's not the issue. Russia was the invader. It's Ukraine's future and Russia's pressure on it and all those sorts of things. So you can see the way that Russia will approach it, which will be very difficult to negotiate with, and they will likely have a lot of details. And we've already heard some of those details that we've heard from officials in Russia. They don't want to see NATO troops on the ground as some kind of security guarantee inside of Ukraine. But the initial words coming from the Kremlin may sound optimistic, but I think the reality will belie that when talks get into detail.
Yeah, we'll be paying close attention to the messaging, as you point out. Nick Robertson, live for us, thank you so much. All right, let's bring in CNN's Matt Egan, joining us live now for the escalating trade war I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So, Matt, just in terms of how this is going to affect the US economy, obviously Canada announced reciprocal tariffs moments ago, $20 billion worth of levies on American goods. The EU also announcing a similar amount, $28 billion worth of tariffs on American goods as well. Explain to us how resilient the US economy is in terms of being able to withstand the shock of a trade war, a global trade war. Give us your take.
Well, Zane, we're about to find out just how resilient the U.S. economy is when it comes to what we're seeing on tariffs, because this trade war, it just continues to heat up. As you mentioned, the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, that kicked in today. The European Union wasting no time retaliating against U.S. goods. Now, that retaliation does not take effect until April, but we're already hearing from the U.S. spirits industry. They're warning that the retaliatory tariffs on whiskey will be devastating because Europe is a major and growing customer for America.